We were zooming through space. Our spaceship, the Stardust Cruiser, was very, very fast. It looked a bit like a giant metal banana, but much shinier. Inside, there was me, Andy, and my best friends, Terry, Jill, and Lisa. We weren't just going on a holiday. Oh no. This was much more important than a holiday. We were on our way to start the biggest, most amazing, most epic game in the entire universe. It was called the Galactic Game, and we had been planning it for ages. The prize was a whole planet, an entire planet. You could do whatever you wanted with it. Imagine that. You could build a 13 million story treehouse if you wanted, or fill all the oceans with lemonade. The journey was long, very long. Space is ridiculously big, you see. To pass the time, we played lots of board games and ate space food, which mostly comes in tubes and tastes a bit like toothpaste, but with different flavors, like chicken-flavored toothpaste or pizza-flavored toothpaste. But mostly we talked about the game. Our game. We were heading to a brand new planet, a big blue and green marble just waiting for us. It had everything: oceans, mountains, forests, deserts. It was a blank canvas, and we were the artists. But instead of paint, we would be using DNA. Real, actual, life-making DNA. It was the ultimate competition. Who could create the most successful life? Jill was the most excited. She kept drawing pictures of the creatures she wanted to make. They had 6 legs and wings and could breathe underwater. Terry wanted to make something big and stompy, like a dinosaur but with laser eyes. I wasn't sure what I wanted to make yet. Maybe something small and clever, something that could build things. Lisa was being very quiet and mysterious. She just smiled whenever we asked her what her plan was. The Stardust Cruiser hummed along, taking us closer and closer to our new playground. The stars whizzed by the window like tiny silver raindrops. The Galactic Game was about to begin, and we were all buzzing with a mix of excitement and nerves. Our ship's computer, who we called Dave, would occasionally interrupt our planning sessions with important announcements like, "We are now passing the Great Swirly Nebula of Glarzen. Please do not stick your head out of the window." Or, "Estimated time of arrival 153 years. Just kidding." It was only a few more days. The planet, which we had named Terra Nova, grew larger in the main viewport every hour. It was beautiful. Swirls of white clouds covered deep blue oceans and vast green continents. It was the perfect stage for our contest. The ultimate test of creativity, and as we would soon find out, survival. The stakes were high, but our spirits were even higher. Now, you can't have a game without rules. Especially not a game where you get to create life and win a whole planet. That would be just silly. So while we floated through the blackness of space, we went over the rules one more time. Rule number 1 was the most important. Each of us would pick one part of the planet, a whole continent, or maybe a massive island, or even a deep, dark ocean trench. It was your patch, your starting zone. You had to stick to your zone to begin with, like having your own corner of the playground. You couldn't just plunk your creatures down in someone else's area. That would be cheating. Rule number 2 was all about the creation part. This was the fun bit. We each had a special DNA synthesizer kit. It looked a bit like a high-tech chemistry set, with lots of glowing tubes and whirring buttons. You could mix and match DNA from millions of different species stored in the ship's database. You could take the legs of a beetle, the wings of a bat, the brain of a dolphin, and the grumpy face of a bulldog and squish them all together to make a brand new creature. You would then release your creation into your chosen zone. The goal was simple. Your life forms had to survive, thrive, and become the most successful on the planet. Success could mean anything: having the biggest population, spreading across the most territory, or just being really, really good at not getting eaten. Rule number 3 was the no interference clause. This was a tricky one. Once we released our creatures, we had to leave. We had to go back to the Stardust Cruiser and just watch from orbit. We weren't allowed to help them. No dropping down food parcels if they got hungry. No building little shelters for them if it rained. No zapping their enemies with a giant space laser. The creatures were on their own. It was a true test of their design. It was like building a paper airplane and then seeing if it can fly all the way across the school oval by itself. You can't run alongside it, flapping your hands to give it a boost. The only exception to the no interference rule was the advisory visit. This was rule number 4. Every few thousand years, which sounds like a long time, but it's just a blink in planet time, we were allowed a short visit. We could go down to the planet for a few hours. We could observe our creatures and talk to them. Well, we could try to talk to them. We could give them advice. Things like, hey, maybe don't build your nests out of dried grass next to that massive volcano. Or, you see those big scary things with sharp teeth? Try running away from them. But that was it. Just advice. No direct help. Then it was straight back to the ship for another few thousand years of waiting. The big day finally arrived. Dave the computer made an announcement. Bleep bloop. We have arrived at Terra Nova. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your tray tables are in the upright position. The Galactic Game is about to commence. We all crowded around the window. The planet was huge. It filled the entire view. We could see towering mountain ranges, sparkling blue oceans, and forests so green they almost hurt your eyes. It was time to pick our spots. Jill, who loves the water, chose a massive archipelago of tropical islands. Terry, of course, picked the vast rocky plains where his big, stompy creatures would have plenty of room to stomp. Lisa, still being mysterious, pointed to a deep, dark, misty jungle in the heart of the largest continent, a place where the sunlight barely reached the ground. I chose the high mountain valleys, with their clear rivers and grassy plateaus. It seemed like a good place for clever creatures to build things. We each loaded our DNA synthesizer kits into our own personal landing pods. They looked like little metal eggs. We said our goodbyes and good lucks. May the best creature win, Jill shouted. My stomposaurs are going to rule, Terry boomed. Lisa just gave a little wave. I felt a flutter of excitement in my stomach. This was it. The game was on. My pod landed with a soft bump in a beautiful green valley. The air smelled fresh and clean, filled with the scent of strange, colorful flowers. I opened up my DNA kit. I decided against making something big and scary. I wanted something smart, something that could work together. I mixed the DNA of an ant for teamwork, a beaver for building, and a monkey for clever hands. I added a dash of human DNA for problem solving. I called them the Builders. I released the first batch, tiny little things, near a stream. They immediately started gathering pebbles and sticks. It was a good start. I wished them luck, closed up my pod, and launched back into orbit. Back on the Stardust cruiser, we all watched on the big screen as the others finished up. We saw Jill release her aquaticats into the turquoise lagoons of her islands. They were sleek, six-legged creatures that swam like dolphins and purred like kittens. We saw Terry's stomposaurs hatch from enormous eggs on the plains. They were even bigger and stompier than he had described. And then we saw Lisa's. She was in the dark jungle. Her creatures were small and shadowy. They moved silently through the undergrowth, their eyes glowing faintly. She called them the Whisperers. They were a bit creepy, to be honest. With all our creations released, we settled in to watch. The game had truly begun. Thousands of years zipped by. Watching a planet evolve is a bit like watching paint dry, except the paint is alive and sometimes eats the other paint. Mostly, we watched on fast forward. We saw seasons change in seconds and forests grow and shrink like they were breathing. Every now and then, something exciting would happen, and we'd slow it down to watch. We saw my builders construct their first little dam. We saw Jill's aquaticats learn to hunt in packs. We saw Terry's stomposaurs have a giant battle over a water hole. It was better than watching TV, but the best part was the advisory visits. It was our chance to get involved, just a little bit. Our first visit was scheduled for the 5,000-year mark. My pod landed in the same valley. It had changed so much. The little stream was now a big lake, held back by a huge dam made of rocks and logs, and the builders had built a whole town of little mud and stone huts. They were bigger now, about the size of kangaroos, and they walked on two legs. I found their leader, a wise-looking one with gray fur on his chin. "Hello," I said. "Great dam. Really top-notch work. My advice is this: start thinking about farming. Planting seeds will give you more food than just gathering berries." He just stared at me blankly, then went back to bossing around some other builders. I hoped he understood. When we got back to the ship, we all shared stories. Jill was thrilled. Her aquaticats had spread to every island in her archipelago. She'd advised them to use sharp shells as tools to open up tough seafood. They were already doing it. Terry was a bit grumpy. His stomposaurs were doing great. They were huge and had eaten almost everything else on the plains. But they were also fighting each other all the time. I told them to try and get along, he grumbled, but they just roared at me and had a pushing contest. We all tried not to laugh. Big and stompy wasn't always the best strategy, it turned out. Lisa's visit was the most interesting. Her whisperers were still mysterious. She said she found them in a network of deep caves beneath the jungle. They had developed a simple language of clicks and whistles. They had also started making art, painting pictures on the cave walls with glowing fungus. "What was your advice?" I asked her. She smiled, that secret smile of hers. "I told them that knowledge is the best weapon," she said. We didn't know what that meant at the time. We just thought it was a very Lisa thing to say. We settled back in for another long wait, wondering what our next visit would bring. Another 10,000 years flew by in a flash of speeding suns and moons. It was time for one of the most important parts of the game, the DNA check. This was how we kept score. You see, after thousands of years, creatures can wander. A stomposaur might wander into my mountains. One of my builders might get lost and end up in Lisa's creepy jungle. The DNA check was how we found out if any of our original creations had died out completely. If your signature DNA was gone from the planet, you were out of the game. It was a nerve-wracking time for everyone. Dave, the computer, sent out thousands of tiny scanner drones to collect samples. The drones were amazing. They were the size of bees and could take a sample from anything. A leaf, a drop of water, a strand of fur, a flake of skin. They flew all over the planet, collecting millions of bits of data. Then they flew back to the ship, and Dave started the analysis. The screen in the main lounge lit up with a swirling map of the planet, covered in different colored dots. Each color represented one of our unique DNA signatures. I held my breath, searching for my color, a bright, friendly yellow. I saw a huge cluster of yellow dots in the mountains. Phew! The builders were still going strong. We all checked our colors. Jill's blue dots were everywhere in the oceans and along the coastlines. Her aquatic cats were doing brilliantly. Terry's red dots were still concentrated on the plains, but there were fewer of them than before. "Oh no," he said, pointing at the screen. A big red patch just blinked out. We zoomed in. A massive volcano had erupted and wiped out a whole herd of his stomposaurs. Terry looked very sad. It was a tough part of the game. You could get attached to your creatures even if they were big, stompy, and not very bright. The scariest part was checking for empty results. If one of us had no dots at all, it meant their creation was extinct. Game over for them. We all stared at the screen, waiting for Dave to finish the full scan. Finally, the results came in. All 4 of our DNA signatures were still present. We had all survived the first round. We let out a collective sigh of relief, but then we looked at Lisa's dots. Her color was a shadowy purple, and her purple dots weren't just in her jungle anymore. They were everywhere. Little purple dots hidden in the mountains, on the plains, even on Jill's islands. The Whisperers were spreading, and nobody had even seen them. The next 50,000 years were different. Things started to get weird. My builders had become amazing engineers. They had built towering cities of stone and wood that clung to the sides of the mountains. They had harnessed the power of the rivers with giant water wheels. They even had a network of telescopes to watch the stars. I was very proud. But during my last advisory visit, I noticed something strange. They seemed afraid. When I asked their new leader what was wrong, she pointed a shaky hand towards the lowlands. "The silent ones," she whispered. "They come in the night. They take our knowledge. They take our people." It wasn't just my builders. Jill's aquaticats, who were now masters of the sea, reported that their underwater coral cities were being raided. Not for food, but for their pearlescent data crystals, which they used to store their history. Terry's remaining stomposaurs, who had actually become a bit smarter and more peaceful, were being hunted. Not with spears or traps, but with terrifying, silent precision. The attackers left no tracks. They were like ghosts. But we all knew who it was. It was Lisa's Whisperers. The purple dots on the DNA map were multiplying at an incredible rate. They were no longer just spreading. They were conquering. During our next meeting, the mood was tense. "Lisa, what did you create?" Jill demanded. "My aquaticats are terrified." Terry slammed his fist on the table. "They're wiping out my stomposaurs one by one. This isn't a game anymore." Lisa just sat there looking calm. "I told you," she said softly. "I advised them that knowledge is the best weapon. They are simply learning. They are adapting. They are becoming the most successful life form. Isn't that the point of the game?" We realized then what she had done. She hadn't designed a creature based on strength or building ability. She had designed a predator of intelligence. The Whisperers didn't just hunt other creatures. They hunted their cultures, their technologies, their very ideas. Then the worst thing imaginable happened. It was during an unscheduled observation. Terry wanted to check on a small, isolated herd of his stomposaurs. He took a landing pod down to a remote canyon. We watched on his suit camera from the ship. He found the creatures, but they were trapped. And then the Whisperers attacked. They moved out of the shadows, tall and slender with glowing eyes. They weren't using claws or teeth. They were using tools. Sophisticated energy weapons they had clearly stolen and adapted from builder designs. We screamed at Terry to get out of there, but it was too late. His camera feed went black. Dave's voice came over the intercom, cold and flat. Life signs for player Terry, terminated. There was a horrible silence in the control room of the Stardust cruiser. Terry was gone. Killed. Killed by the creatures in our game. This had gone too far. This wasn't fun anymore. It was a nightmare. We looked at the main screen. The purple dots of the Whisperers were like a disease, spreading and consuming everything. They were using the builders' engineering, the Aquaticats' navigation skills, and now they had weapons. They were growing more powerful every single day. They were no longer just a species, they were an empire, a silent, deadly, unstoppable empire. And it was our fault. We had created this monster. I looked at Jill. Her face was pale. "We have to stop them," she said, her voice trembling. "They killed Terry. They'll kill everything. Then what? Will they build spaceships? Will they come after us?" It was a terrifying thought. We had created life that was not only intelligent but also hostile, and it was getting smarter all the time. Soon, they might figure out we were up here, watching them. They might see our landing pods. They might see our ship as the next thing to conquer, the next source of knowledge to consume. We were in real danger. The game was over. Now it was about our own survival. "What can we do?" I asked, feeling helpless. "We can't fight them. There are billions of them now." Lisa, for the first time, looked worried. I didn't think they would get this. "Efficient," she stammered. "I never intended for this to happen. But it had happened. We had to find a solution." Jill was the one who said it. "The override protocol," she whispered. "The emergency reset. We can flood the planet." It was the ultimate failsafe, designed for a situation exactly like this. The ship's systems could manipulate the planet's ice caps and weather systems, causing a global flood that would wipe the slate clean. It would destroy everything. My builders, her Aquaticats, and the Whisperers. It was a terrible choice, to destroy all the beautiful life we had created, to destroy our own creations to save ourselves. But what other option did we have? We had to vote. It had to be unanimous. "All in favor of activating the flood protocol?" Jill asked, her hand hovering over the big red button on the control panel. I thought of my brave builders and their beautiful mountain cities. I thought of Terry. With a heavy heart, I nodded. "Aye," I said. Jill nodded too. "Aye." We both looked at Lisa. Tears were streaming down her face. She looked at the screen, at the creeping purple tide her creations had become. "Aye," she whispered. The vote was passed. The Aquaticats, despite their amphibious nature, were adapted to gentle rivers and coastal wetlands, not the violent planet-wide deluge we unleashed. Their lungs and gills could not handle the silt-choked, debris-filled torrents. The sudden cold, oxygen-poor floodwaters overwhelmed their bodies, and their dens and breeding grounds were swept away in the chaos. The builders, for all their engineering brilliance, had constructed their cities high in the mountains, believing themselves safe from any natural disaster. But the floodwaters rose higher than any of their calculations had ever predicted. Their stonework crumbled under the relentless force, and their intricate tunnels filled with water, leaving them with nowhere to escape. Both species faced unique challenges. The Aquaticats could not outswim the endless surging tides, and the builders could not outlast the crushing depths. Their biology and their environments, once their greatest strengths, became their undoing in the face of the flood. The plan was set. Dave the computer began the sequence. Massive energy beams from the Stardust cruiser focused on the planet's polar ice caps. On the main screen, we could see them starting to melt. First slowly, then all at once. Rivers swelled, coastlines vanished, the flood had begun. It was horrifying to watch. We saw builder cities crumble as torrents of water surged through the mountain valleys. We saw the plains where the stomposaurs had roamed become a vast, churning sea. It was the end of our world, the end of our game. We had all lost. But at least we would be safe. But Lisa was acting strangely. She kept saying she needed to go to the bathroom. She was gone for a long time. I didn't think much of it at first. I was too busy watching the destruction I had voted for. But then I noticed a flashing light on a secondary console. A private communication channel had been opened. A short, tight beam transmission, sent down to the planet's surface. Sent to the heart of the Whisperer's jungle territory. I checked the logs. The message was sent just minutes before the flood began. It was from Lisa. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. What had she done? The floodwaters rose higher and higher, until only the very tops of the highest mountains were left. The planet had become a water world. "Scan for life signs, Dave," I ordered, my voice tight. The screen flickered. Builder DNA gone. Aquaticate DNA gone. Stomposaur DNA gone. Everything was gone. Except for a few very strong signals. We zoomed in. There on the raging surface of the new global ocean were boats, hundreds of them. Huge ark-like vessels made of dark jungle wood, sealed with strange resins. And they were filled with survivors. They were filled with whisperers. They had been warned. Lisa had warned them. She had told them what was coming. Her creatures, the ultimate adapters, the masters of knowledge, had listened to her final piece of advice. They had learned how to build boats. They had learned how to survive the end of the world. They had escaped the flood we had created to destroy them. They floated on the endless ocean, the sole inheritors of a drowned planet. They had survived. They had won. The screen showed them all, packed onto their arks, their glowing eyes staring out at their new world. And I was sure that somewhere down there, they were looking up at us. The control room was silent, the hum of the ship's systems the only sound. Jill, Lisa, and I stood together, eyes locked on the screen showing the planet below. The floodwaters had receded, leaving a world changed forever, calm, empty, with only faint signs of life. The devastation was complete, and the silence pressed in on us. As the camera swept over the barren landscape, it was clear. Lisa's whisperers were the only survivors. They moved in small, careful groups, barely visible against the ruined terrain. Every other species, every other hope had been swept away. Jill's breath caught. She turned to Lisa, her face pale, eyes wide with a mix of horror, disbelief, and reluctant respect. The room felt colder, as if the loss below had seeped into the air. "You warned them," Jill said quietly, her voice trembling. There was no accusation, only deep sadness. She looked at Lisa not as a rival, but as someone who had carried a heavy burden. Lisa met Jill's gaze, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She nodded, a single solemn gesture of regret and responsibility. Her hands trembled, and for a moment she looked impossibly small in her suit, dwarfed by the consequences. Tears streaked Lisa's cheeks, but beneath the sorrow was a flicker of pride. She had broken the rule of non-interference, risking everything for her creations. Now she stood as both victor and transgressor. I broke the silence. "But why, Lisa? Your whisperers killed Terry. They were ruthless." My words echoed the pain and confusion we all felt. Lisa's reply was soft but steady. "They were my creatures. I made them to survive. That's what they did. They adapted, endured, and overcame, even us." On the screen, the whisperers navigated the flooded world with uncanny intelligence, working together, thriving where all others failed. It was a testament to Lisa's vision, and to the harsh reality of the game. "That was the goal, wasn't it?" Lisa whispered. "To create life that could outlast anything. I couldn't destroy them for being too good at surviving. If there's blame, it's mine, not theirs." Jill and I exchanged a glance, the weight of Lisa's words settling over us. There was nothing left to say. The game had been about survival, and Lisa's creatures had won, at a cost. The rules were clear. The last player whose creation survived would be the winner. With a heavy heart, Jill walked to the prize cabinet, retrieved the golden trophy, and held it out to Lisa. Lisa accepted the trophy with trembling hands. For a moment she stared at it, her reflection warped in its surface. Jill offered a quiet, "Congratulations." Lisa managed a small, grateful smile. I nodded, meaning it all the same. The victory was bittersweet. The room filled with relief, sorrow, admiration, and regret. We had all lost something, but Lisa had gained a world. The true prize was not the trophy, but the planet itself. Terra Nova, vast and blue, now belonged to Lisa and her whisperers. As she gazed out the window, the responsibility of her victory settled on her shoulders. "What will you do with it?" I asked softly. Lisa watched the planet, her eyes tracing the clouds and oceans. "I have a duty to them now," she said, "to guide them, to help them avoid our mistakes. I owe them that much." She made a quiet vow to watch over her creations, to ensure their survival would not come at the cost of their future, a promise born of both pride and regret. As the ship lifted away from Terra Nova, we sat in silence, each lost in thought. The Galactic Game was over, but its lessons would linger with us. In the lounge, we gathered one last time, reflecting on what we had done and learned. The cost of creation, the danger of unchecked ambition, the weight of responsibility, these truths echoed in our minds. Be careful what you create, we realized, especially if it's clever enough to outgrow you. And as the stars stretched out before us, We knew we would never be the same. Terra Nova's victory was not an ending, but a beginning. In the quiet aftermath, the galaxy seemed to pause, waiting for what would unfold next. Lisa's Whisperers gathered beneath new constellations, their faces lit by the glow of a world they had claimed. The city pulsed with anticipation, a new energy replacing old fears. No longer bound by their old world, the Whisperers debated their next move. Some spoke quietly of distant planets, others traced star maps in the dust, dreaming of what lay beyond. In the shadowed hangars, engineers and scientists worked together. Panels flickered, engines rumbled, and the air was thick with ambition. The great ships, monuments to resilience, were assembled from remnants of the past. Each vessel, a patchwork of memory and hope, rose from oceans and forests, ready to pierce the unknown. Teams of Whisperers, clad in gleaming suits, checked equipment and exchanged nervous jokes. In control rooms, leaders mapped out routes, their eyes bright with excitement and fear. From a quiet vantage, Lisa watched the preparations. She saw friends embrace, rivals shake hands, and children press their faces to glass, wide-eyed at the promise of adventure. Lisa moved among them, offering encouragement and passing on knowledge. She handed over her last tools, a symbolic passing of the torch to those who would shape the future. As the countdown began, the Whisperers gathered at the launch bays. With a final glance at their home, they stepped into the unknown, ready for the next game. The ships soared into the cosmic night, their lights trailing like promises across the void. Each vessel carried not just supplies, but dreams and the hope of a new beginning. Somewhere in the endless galaxy, the next game was already taking shape. Lisa's creations would face new challenges, forge new alliances, and write a chapter no one could predict. The adventure had only just begun. As Lisa and her Whisperers journey through the uncharted reaches of the galaxy, their mission becomes more than exploration. It becomes the dawn of a new era. On every world they visit, the Whisperers plant seeds of change. Civilizations once isolated now open their gates, drawn by the promise of unity and progress. Their ships glide past nebulae, swirling with ancient secrets, carrying the hopes and dreams of countless species. They chart unknown systems, forging new paths where none existed before, their presence a beacon in the cosmic dark. Each planet offers new mysteries, ancient ruins whispering of forgotten empires, landscapes shaped by wondrous forces. With every encounter, the Whisperer's influence grows. Some worlds are won through diplomacy, others through innovation, and some through sheer will. The crew's determination becomes legend, inspiring generations to reach beyond their limits. Alien cultures are reshaped by the Whisperer's vision. Cities rise where wastelands once sprawled, and ancient ruins pulse with new energy. The silent language of the Whisperers, a code of empathy and shared purpose, becomes a common tongue, bridging divides that once seemed insurmountable. Gradually, the galaxy itself changes. Borders blur, old rivalries fade, and new alliances emerge, illuminated by cooperation. Lisa, watching from afar, feels the weight of her choices, the triumphs, the sacrifices, and the friendships forged. She witnesses her creations, the Whisperers, leaving indelible marks across the cosmos, their legacy woven into the very fabric of the stars. The game she began on Terra Nova has become a legend, retold on 1,000 worlds, a story of hope and the courage to change the universe. The legacy of the Whisperers is written in the hearts of countless civilizations, in the songs of children and the dreams of leaders. As the stars themselves seem to shift in response, destinies are rewritten, and the future of the galaxy is forever changed. One thing is clear: the story of the Whisperers is far from over. Their legacy echoes through the cosmos, a promise that as long as there are stars, there will be those who dare to whisper to them. Lisa's ambition knows no bounds. Even as the dust of her victory settles, her gaze is fixed far beyond the horizon, toward realms untouched, mysteries unsolved, and destinies unwritten. She is not content to merely survive or conquer. She yearns to transcend, to become something more. With her Whisperers by her side, Lisa journeys beyond the familiar edges of the galaxy. Together, they pierce the veil of the unknown, venturing into the very fabric of existence itself. Each step forward is a leap into the infinite, where reality bends and the rules of creation are rewritten. Their whispers ripple through the cosmos, subtle yet profound, echoing in the silent corridors between stars. Every word, every thought, becomes a catalyst, forever altering the fate of worlds, and the destiny of all that is, was, and could be. Invisible threads of influence weave through the multiverse, binding distant realms and unknown dimensions. These connections shimmer with possibility, as if the universe itself is a living tapestry. Each thread a story, each knot a choice, each pattern a legacy. Stars flicker with new possibilities, their ancient light now carrying the promise of change. The night sky becomes a canvas for dreams, painted with the colors of hope, ambition, and the unknown. Ancient cosmic laws, once thought immutable, bend to the will of the Whisperers. The universe listens, and in its silent response, energy swirls, galaxies dance, and the boundaries of possibility expand ever outward. Lisa stands at the edge of creation, not just as a conqueror or a creator, but as a force of evolution itself. Her vision ripples outward, touching realities yet unborn, inspiring new worlds to awaken and old ones to transform. In this new era, the game is no longer confined to planets or galaxies. It is played on the limitless stage of existence itself, where every choice echoes across eternity, and every action shapes the unfolding story of the cosmos. The legacy of the Whisperers becomes eternal, a never-ending melody sung by the universe. Their story is woven into the very music of the stars, a harmony that will never fade. The echoes of their ambition reverberate forever, shaping the destiny of all that ever was and all that ever will be. In the vast silence beyond the stars, their journey continues, an endless odyssey, a testament to the power of vision, unity, and the unyielding spirit of those who dare to dream.